Well, welcome to the Middlesex Moments radio show. I'm Dr. Anna Wasesha, president of Middlesex Community College, and I'm elated today to be joined by John Basinger, who I met at a Christmas party, a holiday party for Art Farm. And I have to just say, I had met you at the party, but I had seen you perform King Lear when you did all of King Lear, all 5 acts, only as Lear. And I was so stunned by how well it hung together. It was, and I had never thought of viewing a play through one character's lines, ever. And that's such a wonderful play anyway. So I was delighted to get to meet you. And I just had an interview with the Art Farm folks about the summer production, the Shakespeare in the Grove, and you're going to be Lear in King Lear.
That's correct,
here.
yeah.
It's 2 weekends in July, 4 performances each week. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and it's going to be glorious. Welcome, John Basinger.
Yes.
And I also wanted to talk about what I learned the night at the party, which is that you committed to memory all or a big part of Paradise Lost?
All.
So why would you do that?
The time was 1993, January 30th of 1993. January 30th of 1993 at 2:30 in the afternoon. As a matter of fact, I was walking past Russell Library in Middletown, thinking about the millennium, wondering if I would live that long to see it. And I thought, I have to do something for the millennium, and preferably something that is really big. I had done some memorizing of things, and so that was not an impossibility. And so I thought, but something really big, but in English. And then I thought, well, Paradise Lost. Doesn't everybody think of Paradise Lost as they're walking past the library? So I walked in, checked out a copy of Paradise Lost, took it to the gym, which was in Cromwell at that time, sat down on an exercycle, opened the book up, and began with, "Of man's first disobedience, and the fruit of that forbidden tree whose mortal taste brought death into the world, and all our woe with loss of Eden, till one greater man restore us and regain the blissful seat. Sing, heavenly muse." And I did not stop on that particular day until I had reached the end of that first 26 lines, and went on then for the next 8 or 9 years without stopping, except just, I measured it out step by step. And I went, that doesn't answer the question of why. I wanted to do something for the millennium.
Yeah, and you think in the 20th century, some people think of the 20th century as a kind of paradise, and it was being lost by going into this 21st century. But the why and the how. Yeah. I mean, I do get kind of stuck in the why part, but the how is really intriguing as well, because if you were to start on the first line, and Sing Heavenly Muse reminds me there was this great literary magazine with that title, so good to have that refreshed in my mind. But if you were to start at the beginning and go to the end, how long would it take you to speak the entire Paradise Lost?
When I had it really all completely in my head, performance ready, and there was no issue of really there being an audience there, except maybe just an audience, to watch somebody in a high wire. Is he going to fall or not? I could have started, and probably about 6 to 8 hours later, I would have been finished. Just saying one word after another.
You remind me of Homer. But we have to take a break. So we'll pause for a moment. There will be a break, and then we'll come back. So I was saying you remind me of Homer. And do you remember enough of that oral tradition idea to know, for example, as they would retell these stories, did they change? Or were people at that point committing to memory?
Well, what I know about storytelling, from having been a storyteller, not just one who recites set text, which has really been polished, down to as close a word-for-word rendering as one can do, but rather the idea that you are simply standing up in front of a crowd and telling a story, that the professional storytellers who are very natural are highly polished. I mean, these are stories that they have told many, many times. They don't trouble themselves about whether they get it word perfect, but they certainly trouble themselves about making sure that they hit all of their marks in the building of the story. And so I think what it is that it's a combination of both. It's both pretty much the same every time they tell it when it's practiced, as it would be, But because they're in control of the material, they can bend it to suit the audience, to suit the situation, to suit how they feel, to suit their human lapses. The fact that they'll forget something, they'll find a way to put it back in. So professional storytellers, and I use the word professional here meaning those who are really good at it and have made it their life's work, are not terribly concerned about word for word aspects of it, because it's not a stunt for them. It's a story they're telling.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, even if it were word for word still, then that's the challenge of the, you might say, the actor, is how to take those word for words and give it the appearance of utter naturalness.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But so, yeah.
Yeah. So with Paradise Lost, that's a kind of text that is so foreign. How does the story hang together? You must have the story in your head hung together quite perfectly.
Yeah.
Yes. And then when you memorize it, you're following along with that sort of background narrative of this is where the story's going, but you were doing it word perfect, right?
Pretty much, yes, as much as I could.
Yeah.
I have been actually sort of tested on that, and the percentage was pretty high.
So is it in a meter? Or
yes.
No? It is.
Yeah, not rhyme, but it is. It's iambic pentameter. And the one little dodge of memory one little style or way of working was it being iambic pentameter. That's essentially five feet and 2 beats per foot, so that's 10. So I've got 5 fingers, and so twice through is 10. So, for example, I have a finger motion for every syllable of the poem. Of man's first disobedience and the fruit. There's 10 syllables, and there's the first line. And there was my hand going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I have that for every single, for 10,565 lines I have, either the right hand or the left hand, because sometimes the hand gets tired, when I'm practicing. When I'm practicing.
Are there parts of it that you love more than other?
Oh, for sure.
So what is a part that you love?
Of Paradise Lost. Well, I love doing it, for one thing. Just being in the middle of it. If people like swimming, or people like jogging, or people like anything, kind of a solo activity that has a kind of a gratification even while you're doing it, I certainly do that. The pieces that work best for me are things that maybe don't have any particular outstanding virtues to somebody casually hearing it, but just being able to exercise, to negotiate that particular awkward, perhaps sounding configuration of words and land, keep the sense of it going. Forsake me not thus, Adam, witness heaven, what love sincere and reverence in my heart I bear thee, and unweeting have offended, unhappily deceived. This is what Eve says to Adam after she has pushed issues past the breaking point and has received his wrath for having in a sense deceived him, for that she was competent to handle the challenges that Satan in the form of the serpent would pose her. And it turned out that she was completely buffaloed by him. And then Adam was stuck with the situation of, what do? Do I follow my heart with this woman I love? Or do I just say, no, God has first place in my heart, not you. Sorry, God, I'm going with her wherever she goes. And then, of course, he does. And then he finds out that it's like a marriage made in hell, in a manner of speaking. It's because they have lost in that action the one thing that they had, which was a kind of omniscient innocence. Interesting thought, that.
It is.
But see, in this particular thing, which occurs around line 915 or so of Book 10, I fell in love with that passage, forsake me not thus, Adam, witness heaven. Just the flow of those words. I was just talking to Neely Bruce a few minutes ago, and I said to Neely, look, Neely, this could be the text for a marvelous, for an aria. Write an aria for Phyllis, and he did.
Oh.
And it was performed actually when I did all 12 books back in 2001. Had kind of a big thing at Middlesex at Mohegan Community, Three Rivers Community College. They gave me the use of the facility there, and we did all 12 books over a 3-day period. And part of it was Neely doing some music of the period, and then the aria that he wrote. Phyllis sang it. So, forsake me not thus, Adam. So I love saying those words.
Yeah.
They're lovely.
Yeah.
Just the flow of them.
Right. And so I have to confess that confession is the right word in the context of Paradise Lost, that I never made it all the way through Paradise Lost. So are there parts of it where there's a tremendous kind of existential. It sounds as though the existential crisis.
For the person learning it, or for the...
Well, I was thinking about Adam and
Yes, I know. First of all, just with respect to you never made it all the way through, nor had I until I began memorizing it. In fact, I never read ahead. I never went one line past what that particular day's ration was. So I never knew, I mean, I knew generally, of course, but I certainly didn't know in specifics, how one particular thing was going to resolve itself. I just memorized word for word, and then depended upon repetition and intelligence to begin to string it together logically. Okay, existential.
Well, I was saying I didn't read it. I mean, I started it. I didn't finish it. And
existential crisis for Adam.
Yes,
oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. You see, here's the thing about it. The reason why, in a sense, there's a great deal of bogosity at the foundation of Paradise Lost. I stated it very succinctly.
Yeah.
Is that God gave Adam his perfect gift, Eve.
Right.
And what in the world would he expect? That what God hath joined together, let no man put asunder.
Right.
God was giving him a dilemma, which he lost. Which was a losing proposition either
way. Right.
Because if he chose God, he himself was severing the bond that God had joined them together in.
Yeah.
If, on the other hand, he preserved that bond, he was severing the bond that held him with God in this perfect connection. He could not win. So it seems to me that's the existential dilemma of this thing. Anything else is interesting, profound perhaps, but this is the core thing to me, he said with great energy.
Well, great energy deserved by the text. So Lear has serious existential issues as well. Yes, put it mildly.
Yes. Not with God itself, himself, herself, themselves, ourselves, but with, well, perhaps the worst possible person with whom to have an existential dilemma, which is oneself. Mm-hmm. Because where do you go for surcease?
The tragedies are so painful to me, the Shakespearean tragedies, because you see it's only going in one direction. It's only going to devolve. And he has so many ways in which he's not paying attention, so to what's going on around him. Yeah. So it is that the battle maybe between the ego. Do you spend time reading what would be called like literary criticism of something like Lear or something like Paradise Lost, or are you like the new what was it called, the new criticism?
Mm-hmm.
This is the
text
19th.
only.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So
exactly. I would tend to fall in that direction, but the only reason for not reading criticism from other people is that it can affect one's own mind. But on the other hand, the reason to read that is for exactly the same reason. So you're kind of, again, caught betwixt and between. I would say that you don't want to turn to criticism of the text as the first introduction to it. What you want to do is to meet it as best you can, fresh. And of course, it's going to be a fumbling meeting. There's no question about it. And there's going to be so much that you'll miss, et cetera, but you're not studying it for a test to make sure you get back what we, the teachers, want you to give us back. What you would be doing would be, well, in a sense, like if you're an actor, what you don't want is somebody to tell you about the character. You want to find the character yourself. There'll come a time when, certainly you would be interested to know what others would think about it because you're struggling with it or working with it, whatever. But essentially, you have to trust yourself that between you and the character is where your first energies have to go, and you have to make mistakes. And in fact, it's good to make those mistakes because sometimes they're going to be the kind of mistakes that everybody makes. They're the obvious, kind of freshman 101 type of mistakes, But they're your mistakes. And that at least is a sign that your mind is engaged. And something can be done with that, because if I say something which is wrong, presumably I'm saying it for a reason. And that gives you, the teacher, for example, a chance to see where my mind is and to see what kind of things you can say that could kind of move me towards, maybe a more productive look. Whereas if I'm just sitting there dumb, saying nothing, you don't know what to do with me.
I know.
So yes, I think the answer is one must be engaged.
Right. And we have to take a break. And when we come back, let's move on to Lear this summer and
Sure.
how you're thinking about how the production. Well, we're back. And I'm delighted this afternoon to be speaking with John Basinger, who's one of the most remarkable people I have ever met in my whole life. And my life is getting longer every minute. And so over the break, we were talking a little bit about preparing the Lear role for an Oddfellows production, which was scheduled to happen in 2011.
It was 2009 when he first approached me about it, and then it finally kind of died as a project and as an Oddfellows project about 2 years later, about 2000, about the time you came.
And then whose idea was it to make it a one-man show?
Well, keeping in mind that I had long since committed Paradise Lost to memory, in fact 10 years before that, there are two things that go into that. One is, as a teacher of theater and sign language, but theater now, and drama in particular, I had occasion to teach King Lear. I don't know that I was a very brilliant teacher of King Lear. In fact, I think I was probably not such a great teacher of it at all. But one of the problems was I really didn't understand it at some level. There was something wrong with the play. I mean, the obvious things one could always talk about. You know, here was a man who made a disastrous mistake with respect to his daughter's affection, his youngest daughter's affection, and he, misreading that, he lashed out in anger and created a situation that just was perfectly horrible in terms of its effect on everybody. But the structure of the play puts most of the theatrical energy into the subplot, the Gloucester Edmund Edgar subplot. And although as a piece of literature, and Harold Bloom, I've been reading him about this, loves it as a work of art, as a work of literary art, he feels, along with, I think it was Charles Lamb, who gave sort of the definitive statement that this cannot be done on stage. Lear cannot be realized as an onstage character, the play, but Lear the character. And Harold Bloom is unequivocating about that. He said he's never seen a production that worked, and he does not ever expect to. I would like to invite him to see The King, but that's another matter.
Yeah.
So
you're proving that he was wrong.
Well, so it was a troublesome play, and I've long felt that it was really in those two pieces. Really, it was Lear, but then there was all of this other activity that was going on. It's not that there are no ties between them, but the ties are not the kind of thing that are easy to show on stage, and that the action is kind of disjointed. So I thought, with that back in my mind, I thought, well, what would happen if somehow or other one just, and then the thought more or less came to me, take the role of Lear out of Shakespeare's play and put it on stage as a one-character play. So there would be an actor, or there would be a person who would stand on stage reciting Lear's lines. The question is, who is that character? And there's no backstory as to who this person is. This person might be, in a sense, the model for all existential human beings, because here is somebody who exists only in the moment that he is reciting Lear's lines, and what goes on before that and what goes on after that is totally unknown. This is his defining characteristic, and that, I think, is a very powerful theatrical situation. And it also ended up being, I was not 100% surprised at this, but I was gratified to see how right I was, that this can hold a stage.
I know, and it does. Yeah. Are there other examples? Have you ever heard of? I haven't either, and I've seen an awful lot of Shakespearean things and sort of riffs on Shakespeare.
There might be other ones that because I'm not all that familiar with all of Shakespeare's works, and so I could not say that. I can't say that there isn't, but others who have more knowledge about it than I think that this is really the only one for which this is possible in quite that way.
It's a very modern thing to do when you think about it. Yeah.
It has, of course. I mean, there's no production of Lear that is ever without cuts, and of course the Nahum Tate version that held the stage for about 150 years, as historians tell us, had so severely cut the play. That it was a love story between Edgar and Cordelia. They had written all that in because there's no indication in Shakespeare's Lear that there's any relationship between Edgar and Cordelia at all.
So they fixed the plot.
Yeah,
in a way that they thought would be...
They made a lovely play out of it, but it was not the play Shakespeare had written.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Well, I'm still so intrigued by this idea of memorization. Do you remember as a child, memorizing things? And was this something that you did?
We were just required to do it in school, you know.
Right.
I was neither good nor bad at it. I was just like everybody else, you know. I had to memorize something one time to be excused from English class to go up to the state tournament, basketball tournament, to see the games. This is the forest primeval, the murmuring pines and hemlocks. I had to memorize, whatever the teacher gave me, a certain number of stanzas from Evangeline that I had to memorize. So I did that.
Does it change the rest of the way that your brain works to have a muscle in it that is so tuned to remembering?
Well, it certainly doesn't give me any sort of facility with memorizing, you know, in some sort of savant type of way, you know, where I can look at something and you would look at it and I would get it instantly, but you wouldn't. Not like that. Nor do I have any special ability to just remember ordinary daily things like, you know, if I go to the supermarket, I'm thinking, well, I was here for a reason, but what? You know, that kind of thing.
Right.
No, it doesn't do
Phone
anything,
numbers, license plates.
It doesn't do anything special in that way. So the question, I guess, is what does it do? Well, for one thing, it gives me the absolute knowledge that it is possible to memorize an enormous amount of material. Without any particular memory gifts other than just determination. And, you know, a modicum of intelligence, of course, because I'm not just memorizing random things, I'm memorizing a text that has meaning, and so one has to understand the text, not so much just to rattle it back off mechanically, but to tell the story, to say the words in a manner which would be attractive to an audience or interesting to an audience. You know, that would take interpretation, and they tell us that interpretation does require a modicum of intelligence. So I guess I can claim that.
I'm thinking about the iambic pentameter side of it, that there's something about lyric that is comforting, maybe like the heartbeat. There's some, you know, kind of constant...
Oh, I think you're right.
You know, yeah. So even if you aren't thinking about the text, it's the hearing of it that just gives a solace in a way, and that, you know.
I would think so. I would think so. I wouldn't know, you know, how to, you know, connect all the dots perfectly to give you, you know, a really sharp picture of what you're saying. But certainly the whole idea of a group of people gathered together to hear someone perform, and to have the performance be of some substance, perhaps as Paradise Lost was for hundreds of years to people. It was the literal truth. It was Milton's version of the retelling, as it were, the biblical story, putting it together in a way which made it as real as he knew how to make it in the language that he was using, and to do it in a language which had pattern to it, not rhyme, but a pattern. It had the stress flow, you know, stresses on the lines. It had the iambic pentameter, which many people say is sort of the natural rhythm of English, you know. So yeah, I would think that absolutely, and assuming that the person knew how to read an audience and knew how to use his or her voice and so on, but let's say his voice, because probably mostly would be a man doing that.
So people marvel that Shakespeare could have written all those plays. Now that your life is changed because you've got this whole book in your head. Do you marvel that John Milton could have written that?
Well, yes, the answer is of course, because it's one thing to look at a mountain and think, oh, there's a mountain, that's Mount Everest, you know. But then if you're getting out there with your shovel in the backyard and you start piling up dirt, you get an idea of just how big that mountain is. So those of us who are scribblers in one form or another have to acknowledge, you know, the genius of those who have done that kind of stuff. You can't let yourself be stopped by that, otherwise you do nothing. But the answer is yes, yeah, you bet, for sure.
Did he write for, I don't even know how long he lived.
Milton?
Yes.
Born in 1608 and died in 1674, so he lived 68 years. 1608, 66 years, yeah.
At that time, that was quite a long life.
Well,
and he was writing for most of it?
Yes.
And he's writing across the same period
certainly
of time.
as he was moving into his maturity. The answer is yes. Yeah.
And writing at the same time as Shakespeare.
No, just after Shakespeare. He was born in 1608. Shakespeare probably died, 10 or years after that, So they overlapped a little bit, but I think about this, at what point in Milton's development did he actually begin reading Shakespeare, learning about it, or seeing those plays, So certainly it would have been quite soon, and he would certainly have been enormously impressed and taken by them. And Shakespeare would certainly have been one of the people he would be modeling himself against, because I think it's evidence that Milton was not unaware of his enormous intellectual gifts and his ability to do poetry and drama and so forth.
Mm-hmm. So this summer, when the production happens, there will be at least one conversation after the play, which I'm really looking forward to. Sure. So I hope that people will come to the play, first of all, to see this marvelous performance, but also think about some of these issues that are really so universal and timeless, the conflicts, the situations where neither choice is a good choice, the kind of coming of age piece of that, the having to go through that and get to the other side with a sense, a transcendental sense in a way, that we pass through life, we make difficult decisions, we're changed by those decisions, and we don't really know where we're going to wind up. I feel that way about the 21st century. So if the 20th century was paradise and we lost it, we don't know where we're going to wind up.
No, and we haven't even talked about climate change.
No, I know. That's where my mind was traveling. But unfortunately, we've come to the end of this very brief program.
I'm sorry. That's so much fun.
It's so nice to see you again, and I can't wait to see you in Lear. I'm going to go a couple of times, and I hope that it's one of those beautiful summer nights.
Yeah, just to stress that this will not be the one character Lear. This will be the full thing. In spite of Harold Bloom, we're going to do it.
Yeah, the full 9 yards. Do you know the source of that expression? Full 9.
I've always thought it had to do with gravel trucks.
No, I'll tell you. It's it takes 9 yards to make a man's suit.
Oh, fabric.
So if you have money, you've got money for the full 9 yards. Otherwise, you're going to cut corners. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Literally cut corners.
Exactly,
Good.
literally. I didn't mean to say that way. So thank you, John Basinger, for joining me today. And for those listeners who are interested in learning more about Shakespeare in the Grove, information will be on the college website, mxcc.edu, and also at art-farm.org.
Yes, your partners.
That's right, our partners. So thanks so much, and I hope everybody out in the listening audience is having a great day, and will have an even better summer, being enriched by experiencing King Lear here on the campus in July.